So after all of these are all put in first. You get through your COGO first. And the reason is this is going to be you're going to use this as control throughout the best fit process. These are going to be anchor points. These are, you've got at this point hopefully around 30% of your parcels in by legal description. So you've got some error correction, I guess you could call it, during your best fit process. So your COGO's in, those are your anchor points. You're going to build out from these COGO parcels because these are nice legal descriptions here. The orthophoto is, that's your base for best fit mapping. You've got to match the orthophoto. If nice rectified tax maps are no good if you start drawing lines through houses and drawing lines through driveways. So your orthophoto is going to be this is your guide.
What scale do you recommend? I know orthophoto is resolution.
Depending on rural to town areas, I'm pointing at Larry because he knows a lot more about orthophotos than I do.
Well, in West Virginia, we have the 400 schedules. And Kurt, you bring up a really good point. You bring up a point where we've had difficulty on a lot of these projects, but we've worked our way through it because I hate to use the word bluffed our way through it, but we kind of fought our way through it. The 400 scales that we have are quite adequate in the rural areas, and that's what you normally would map those areas at. When we bring those 400 scale, and if it's the only source of ortho we have into the towns, the maps are at 1 to 100 scale, a lot of problems show up. But within those town areas, there's a really good likelihood that we have COGO'd a lot of that information. Or we have constructed those from old town maps. Now, old town maps are not COGO'd per the se. Old town maps are dimensions as opposed to bearings. Very seldom they give bearings, but they always give dimensions. And a lot of those parcels are rectilinear parcels. So a lot of those parcels in the town maps, in the town areas, have been mapped by dimensions in the same manner we would do COGO, but by dimensioning the parcel in and using estimated angles. In that case, then when you take that town area at 1 to 100 scale and put it on a 1 to 400 scale ortho, yeah, there's a lot of problems. A lot of problems show. You have to figure out which one is my better source. Do I still need to adjust my town to this 400 scale ortho? We would like to see 1 to 100 scale 6-inch pixel photos in those towns. So we have to, in today's environment, the environment we're in today, we have to work with those 400 scales. Quite frankly, in the towns, we most likely fall back on the town maps as the real priority because they're more accurate in the COGO information. Did that confuse the issue or okay?
Okay, so after your photos, using your rectified tax maps, this is where you get your geometry from. This is where you get your information for your best fit parcels. Now, it's very important not to trace lines from the rectified tax map. Even if this tax map is rectified perfect, it fits all your right-of-ways, it looks like it's running along all the field lines, you still got to use some intuitive judgment here because these were drawn on paper maps and they look nice and neat, but they weren't drawn on top of photos. And even if you've got your tax maps that have not rectified very well, the ones where you could not get the rectified 4 control points, 3 control points, no matter what you did, you got image warping and you reverted back to as close as you could get without warping it. Then it still gives you your guide. So even if your lines are, you can have tax maps that rectify as poorly as 20 to 30 feet, 40 feet, 50 feet off of where they should fall in the ortho. And that's okay if that's the case. You can't get it rectified, you can't get it rectified. But you use that geometry that is on the tax map and fit it to your photos. And now not tracing it, acreage is going to be very important. So you've got the gist of what these parcels need to look like. And you need to keep in mind of your acreage is listed on that tax map. It may not always be that the way this parcel looks like it sits on the tax map may not quite fit its acreage. Normally they do, it's just a matter of fitting that to the ordinance, but you've got to keep in your acreage on a per parcel basis in mind when you're doing best fit. That keeps you honest, it keeps you accurate.
Do you make them exactly match, or is there a certain tolerance that you use?
You're not going to make them. You're not going to be able to make them exactly match in a lot of cases, and some you can. I don't know if I would say 50-50 they would exactly match, but you want to get close. And generally, the guideline is 5%. Within 5% is okay. What we do at an end of a project is acreage divergence report. And so you've got what the acreage should be, what the actual calculated acreage of how it was mapped, and all of them are reported in there. Everything above 5% are the ones that these need to be looked at. Something's, either the acreage is listed wrong on the source document, or something's going on with the mapping. There's some lines that need to be moved.
Trey, where do you get your acreage? Now, are you just looking at it? I know to do that report, you're not just looking at it for the legal description. Where do you guys extract that from? Do you try to go in and do some extractions out of the legal description, or are you pulling that from somewhere else within the assessment data? I'm just curious because a lot of people I know I've talked to have that issue of extracting what the property acreage is supposed to be out of this text field for legal description into a usable, comparable, you know.
Well, we got two avenues there. We've got a script that we use for when we get started with one of these projects in IAS that does go into the legal description and try to extract that acreage. It's pretty accurate. The problem is that legal description in IAS is not standardized whatsoever on how it's entered in there. There's acreage in there. Sometimes it's worded different. Sometimes it's in there by square feet dimensions. And so we get a 85% maybe of good acreage out of there. But really it comes from the documents. We capture it from the tax maps, because that should match what the IAS, what they're being taxed by. So we capture that during the mapping process, and then we would use that to compare the actual acreage verdict report.
So IAS does have a field that doesn't calculate acreage for that parcel. It's either keyed in as an acreage when field appraiser types in, it's 1 acre home site and 5 acres of woodland, or it'll actually calculate out on a effective frontage and depth for your front foot parcel. It'll calculate an acreage based on that. It's fairly close, assuming that the data is inputted by the field personnel correctly.
Right. Okay.
So you can pull from that as well. I use that instead of trying to pull it out of the legal description for the very reason you were talking about having different formats in the legal description.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and when it comes to the divergence, like I said, we use the tax map acreage, because that's our most common source, and that's the one that's shown on the tax map, and that's what somebody's going to look at the tax map and say this should be, this is not big. I got the right-of-way network mentioned up there. Again, the right-of-way network being important for building your parcels. That's the reason that's mentioned, and you always keep that right-of-way network in mind as you're mapping.